Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael Parker stepped off the bus that connected the airport to the Grand Coast Resort, feeling the warm ocean breeze hit his face like a belated invitation to switch off from work. Whenever he went on vacation with his wife, he carried an invisible mental folder full of unseen spreadsheets, but on this late Friday afternoon, he promised himself a truce: 3 days without alarms, without emails, without questions about conversion rates. Jennifer, 10 steps ahead, was spinning around to film the sign with her phone, laughing as the wind made her hair take up the entire screen. She seemed like a different person when salt began to soak into her skin, and this, Michael thought, was part of why he still fought for their 8-year marriage. He was still surprised by how Jennifer reinvented herself by the sea. Arriving at the lobby confirmed another old realization: Jennifer allowed herself to be dazzled without shame. While Michael signed the check-in forms, she moved between the marble columns, loudly commenting on the shell-shaped chandelier, tasting the damp towel offered by the receptionists, and approving even the ambient music that sounded like a movie soundtrack. The hotel manager, Scott Coleman, an old college buddy of Michael's, appeared in a navy blue blazer with a ready smile. They hugged with back slaps, exchanged jokes about poker nights that never ended, and finally, Scott handed over the magnetic room keys for room 712, with a view of the cove. In the same sentence, he extended an invitation to the traditional volleyball game, guests versus staff, Saturday at 9. Michael confirmed he wasn't the same as he was 20 years ago, but he'd join if the rules allowed plenty of stretching. On the way to the elevator, Jennifer grabbed the activity flyer stacked on a counter. The photo dominating the cover showed a diver surrounded by colorful fish over a shallow reef, the silver tank reflecting turquoise light. "Look at this," she said, shoving the paper against Michael's chest. "Scuba diving offshore, intro session early tomorrow." Michael raised his eyebrows. He'd never learned how to equalize ear pressure, and the idea of descending several meters tied to a tank made him uneasy. Still, he managed a "we'll see." Next to the text, the instructor's name appeared in large letters: Blake Donovan. 3 minutes later, as they were riding the mirrored elevator, a male voice announced from inside the cabin, "First lucky couple I run into today." It was Blake himself, holding a box of blue flippers with brand new labels. Tall, tanned, with a smile that showed all his teeth and spoke with drawn-out vowels typical of reality show hosts. Blake took the initiative to press the button for the 7th floor and, without missing a beat, launched into his private show. He asked where they were from, complimented Jennifer's soft accent, mentioned he'd guided couples from Norway to Brazil, and said that if God were truly whimsical, he would have painted all the reefs on the planet with the colors found there, near the sandbar marking the resort's territory. Jennifer let out laughs that Michael hadn't heard in months. When the metallic voice announced their destination and the doors opened, Blake offered to carry their bags, claiming his morning prayer included working on his triceps specifically for that purpose. Michael politely declined. A second before they parted, the instructor winked at Jennifer and reminded her, "Intro session tomorrow at 8. If you arrive 5 minutes early, I'll have more time to show you the equipment." Once the door closed, the hallway suddenly felt narrower, as if the rolling suitcase didn't fit alongside the loaded feeling in Michael's chest. Room 712 had a balcony with glass railings, a king-size bed, and an artificial coconut scent mixed with some citrus disinfectant. Jennifer dropped her backpack and ran to the balcony to film the sunset. Michael, out of habit, checked the air conditioning temperature, the Wi-Fi password, and the safe's position. When she returned, she described in detail the ballet of fishing boats drifting away in the distance, each sail golden in the late afternoon light. Michael listened, but half his attention was on a recent memory: Jennifer's laugh at Blake's compliments. It shouldn't bother him, he repeated to himself, it was just tour guide charisma. Even so, during dinner that first night, a seafood sequence that included grilled lobster, he noticed Jennifer scanning the dining hall, perhaps looking for the instructor. He steered the conversation toward the taste of white wines, but the silent tension had already settled in. Saturday dawned with the smell of roasted coffee and relentless sun filtered through the translucent curtains. Michael was already in athletic shorts when Scott called to confirm the volleyball match. It was 8 in the morning, the ball would be served promptly in an hour. Jennifer emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, asking if he'd accompany her to the diving session. Michael explained he'd be on the court, but if she wanted, she could watch from the sand stands. She shook her head, somewhat disappointed, said she'd check out souvenir shops and maybe stop by the diving area to ask about extra excursions. Michael kissed her forehead, trying to ignore the pang of jealousy growing along with the sun outside. They left together until the fork in the sidewalk, each heading their own way. The sound of artificial birds chirping from the ambient sound system announced a perfect day, but Michael felt the opposite premonition. The volleyball court was between tall palm trees and rows of lounge chairs occupied by guests armed with colorful drinks. Scott handed Michael a green t-shirt with the resort's logo and quickly outlined the strategy: short serves and forcing the center block, because the waiter playing defense for the staff team was unbeatable at the back. The sun hammered down for 2 full hours. Michael dove into the sand to save impossible balls, heard Jennifer shout his name just once. She had really come to watch, and felt juvenile pride reignite, something he hadn't felt since college championships. In the end, the guests won 21-18 in a sweaty victory. When he went to grab his towel, he looked around and didn't see his wife. Before he could ask, Scott said he'd spotted Jennifer heading toward the central pools after the first set. She probably went to get more water, he commented. Michael smiled unconvincingly. Still out of breath, Michael climbed the external stairs of Block A, crossed stuffy hallways, and pushed open the door to the room. Jennifer's towel lay on the bed, her phone charging next to the nightstand, and no other clue indicated where she was. The clock read 11:15. Michael took a quick shower, put on dry shorts, and decided to look for her. He walked through the garden, passed by the buffet line, and asked a waiter if he'd seen a woman in a straw hat and orange beach cover-up. The guy pointed toward the diving hut. Michael followed the gesture and, as he approached, recognized Blake from afar talking animatedly, using broad hand gestures as if describing leaping whales. Jennifer, sitting on a wooden bench, laughed at something he'd said. The laugh echoed like a hammer blow in Michael's consciousness. He hid behind a column and observed, friendly gestures, no physical contact, but too much intimacy for a couple who'd reached 40 dealing with silences. Gathering his courage, Michael walked up to them, clapping his hands to shake off imaginary sand. Jennifer looked up, surprised and perhaps a little guilty. Blake made a point of complimenting Michael's performance on the court, said he'd seen part of the game from the bar terrace and that Michael had a champion's arm. Jennifer talked about an extra excursion scheduled for 5 in the morning the next day, heading to a remote reef where coral formed natural tunnels. The instructor assured them the premium package covered everything and that, being an early hour, the boat would be almost empty. Michael said he'd think about it. Blake said goodbye with exaggerated politeness, promising to reserve 2 spots in case they changed their minds. When they were alone, Michael asked what she was doing there. Jennifer explained she'd been walking around the pools, bumped into Blake by chance, and accepted an offer to see the new diving instruments. He swallowed hard, saying he didn't appreciate the instructor's tone. She laughed, called it nonsense, and they returned to the room with an invisible cloud following each step. Before dinner, Michael tried to talk. He said he didn't feel comfortable with the pre-dawn dive, that he'd prefer scheduling something in a group and at a civilized hour. Jennifer raised her chin, reminding him she loved diving and that for 2 years she'd been trying unsuccessfully to interest him in it. Michael replied he wasn't forbidding anything, but he thought it reckless to go with strangers to a remote beach. The word forbid triggered a warning signal in her. They quietly argued about trust, freedom, and boundaries until someone knocked on the neighboring wall asking for silence. They stifled the topic, went down to the buffet restaurant, and the atmosphere at the table could have been cut with the swordfish knife from the main course. Jennifer barely touched her wine. Michael ate without tasting anything. They went up early, turned off the lights without goodnight kisses, each sunk in unfathomable thoughts. When Michael's alarm went off at 7, the left side of the bed was cold. He called her name once, nothing. He got up, opened the bathroom door, dry towels. The balcony, empty. He went to the nightstand and found a recycled paper note, went on the diving trip. Back before lunch. Love you. The hurried handwriting trembled at the corner of the page. The world spun as if he were still lying down. In 10 minutes he put on jeans, slipped on sneakers, went down to reception, and looked for Scott. The manager confirmed the boat had left at 5 and would return around noon, carrying only one registered couple, but, last minute, the husband had backed out due to a stiff neck. Michael just pressed his lips together, feeling the phrase, "just your wife and the instructor," echo like a war drum inside his head. Hours remained until their return, and each minute fell on Michael like an invisible weight. He tried to occupy his mind reading news on his phone, but the letters blurred together. At 11:45, he positioned himself on the sand near the pier, watching the horizon marked by small white crests. Noon came, regular tourist boats docked, the diving boat didn't. Scott sent a message saying they might have stopped to fix something minor. 2 hours passed. At exactly 2 o'clock, the blue boat appeared. Michael recognized Jennifer sitting on the bow, ponytail swaying in the wind, and Blake beside her, piloting with a relaxed demeanor. No other passengers. The engine shut off, they jumped onto the dock laughing about something. Michael kept a stoic posture, but anger boiled under his skin. Without saying a word, he took Jennifer's wet backpack, intertwined his fingers with hers, and led her to the elevator. The silence, heavier than the diving bottles, traveled through the floors. As soon as they entered the room, Michael closed the door with surgical care and exploded. He wanted to know why the trip had lasted 9 hours when it was supposed to take half that. He asked if she realized how improper it was to spend an entire day on a deserted beach with a man she barely knew. Jennifer retorted that he wasn't barely known, he was a trained employee, and that the boat had had a fuel pump problem, forcing them to wait for the tide to rise to start the backup motor. Michael asked for proof, she had none. He questioned whether she'd at least thought to inform him, she reminded him her phone had stayed in the room. The argument escalated into mutual accusations about freedom and control until Jennifer cried for the first time. When the tears weren't enough to dissipate the fury, Michael opened the suitcase and started throwing clothes back in as if discarding evidence of a crime. He announced they'd leave on the first flight. Jennifer tried to hug him, he pulled away. He left the room, went down 2 flights of stairs, and went straight to Scott's office. He closed the door and told the story in a firm tone: suspicion of inappropriate conduct between the instructor and guest, breach of trust, possible harassment. Scott, who until then had been just a beer buddy, immediately adopted a professional demeanor. He explained that all the resort's boats had security cameras installed and that he could review the footage. Michael agreed, feeling his stomach freeze, partly out of fear of what he'd see, partly because confirmation would mean the end of something he believed indestructible. The monitoring room was in a refrigerated basement where screens displayed dozens of angles: pool, reception, docks. Scott fast-forwarded the video to 5:10 in the morning. The first sequence showed Jennifer adjusting her life jacket while Blake tested the regulator. There were scenes of open sea, then the camera on the deserted beach. There, the instructor spread a towel on the sand and pointed at something in the sky. Seconds later, he moved too close. It was possible to see, without any doubt, a prolonged kiss. Later, Blake filmed Jennifer diving alone, then lay down beside her. The lens was distant and the resolution didn't allow vivid details, but the intimate posture left no room for benevolent interpretations. Michael felt his face burn. Scott paused the video. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Finally, the manager asked if he wanted a copy. Michael confirmed with just a nod, like signing a sentence. Blake was summoned to the office immediately. He tried to justify himself, saying the boat had malfunctioned, that the scare had brought them closer. Scott reminded him of the internal manual clause prohibiting relationships with guests and informed him of his termination for just cause. Blake didn't argue, he just took a deep breath, offered generic apologies, and left with his badge in hand. Michael stored a copy of the video on a USB drive provided by security. He climbed back to the room with leaden steps. Jennifer was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, face swollen from crying. He handed her the USB drive, turned on the TV, and showed the file on the big screen. She covered her mouth, sobbed, it was a mistake, swore she'd felt seduced, vulnerable, that it was the first and only time. Michael listened to everything without interrupting, but inside him, something cracked irreversibly, like tempered glass that shatters entirely without warning. They packed in silence. Michael paid the bill, declined Scott's offer for a farewell drink, and booked a taxi to the airport. On the way, Jennifer repeated promises. He replied only that there was nothing to discuss until they were home. The overnight flight became a stage for broken memories, their first trip together, the marriage proposal at sunset, the apartment furnished in installments. Michael alternated between anger and grief. Jennifer fell asleep after stopping crying, and he watched her reflection in the dark window, trying to understand where circumstantial weakness began and character ended. When they landed, the distance between them was greater than the 1,000 miles traveled overnight. At home, the apartment felt smaller, as if the walls had moved closer to listen. Michael placed his suitcase in the hallway and asked Jennifer to remove her things by the end of the week. She begged for couples therapy, mentioned friends who had overcome similar crises. He walked to the living room table, where they kept travel photo frames, and turned all of them face to the wall. He said he couldn't rebuild on recent lies. Jennifer tried to touch his hand, he pulled away. The collective silence of the old furniture turned her cry for help into an echo. Michael went up to the office, locked himself in, and, for the first time in years, cried without caring to seem strong. 3 days later, Jennifer left with 2 rolling suitcases, a coat over her arm, and the look of someone trying to memorize every detail before the door closed. Rachel, her childhood friend, waited in the car. Michael stayed in the kitchen, pretending to read a report he didn't understand. The sound of the elevator descending was physical proof that something had ended. That same night, he emailed a family law attorney, attaching the video and detailing the facts in an objective tone. The response came within hours: conclusive proof of breach of marital duty, possibility of requesting unequal division of assets and dismissing alimony claims. Michael read it twice, feeling bitter relief. He didn't intend to humiliate her, but he also wouldn't carry the weight of the mistake alone. The following months passed like years in an old clock. Initial petition, preliminary hearing, deadlines for rebuttals. Jennifer's defense claimed emotional fragility combined with undue influence by the instructor, but the video spoke louder. The judge explicitly mentioned breach of marital duty, and classified the case under exclusive fault, ruling out any possibility of compensatory alimony. The division of assets followed the partial community property regime, but given the evidence, the principle of inefficaciousness was applied, granting Michael full ownership of the apartment purchased before the marriage and a larger share of the financial investments. His lawyer also requested sanctions for bad faith litigation when the opposing party tried to challenge the video, insinuating manipulation, an argument dismissed by the chain of custody provided by the hotel. Jennifer remained silent in almost all hearings, except to say she regretted it. During this period, Michael experienced a kind of loneliness that was almost instructional. In the workplace corridors, colleagues discreetly commented on the case, applauding his firmness. At home, Jennifer's absence materialized in empty drawers and cold pillows. He discovered that anger is a quick-burning fuel. Sooner or later, only the ashes of grief remain. He started running in the park at dawn, revamped his diet, and returned to writing short stories, a habit he'd abandoned. Each running step seemed to expel a fragment of pain. Even so, turning the corner leading to the apartment, the memory of the kiss on the deserted beach humiliated him again. He realized he'd have to learn to live with it, not erase it. Jennifer, for her part, temporarily moved into Rachel's guest room. She sought a therapist, immersed herself in online marketing courses to fill her nights, and avoided parties. She sent sporadic messages to Michael, long confessions of regret that he read without replying. In one, she mentioned that Blake had sent her an apology via social media and that she'd ignored it. Michael didn't know if this consoled or irritated him. He deleted the message and continued his day. The divorce proceedings advanced, but both their lives oscillated between past and present, like a rudderless boat that insists on staying close to the familiar shore. The ruling came on a rainy October morning. The judge approved the agreement suggested by the presiding judge. The apartment and larger investments went to Michael, the car and smaller savings to Jennifer, no alimony between the parties. There was also a symbolic moral damages fee, already included in the court costs. The courthouse set the date for signing in 30 days. During this interval, Jennifer requested a final meeting. Michael agreed in the name of civility. They sat in a quiet downtown cafe. She handed over a letter saying she understood the consequences but cherished good memories. He replied that he remembered happy days too but needed to move forward. There were no arguments. When they said goodbye, neither cried, only the metallic, brief, almost cutting sound of the cup placed on the saucer remained. On the morning they signed the divorce papers, Michael arrived early at the courthouse, crossed the marble lobby, and took a deep breath upon seeing his name on the docket. Jennifer appeared minutes later, wearing a blue dress he recognized from a previous trip. They exchanged formal handshakes in front of the clerk, completed the procedure, and exited through opposite doors. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the still wet sidewalk. Michael stored the certified copy in his leather briefcase, walked to the car feeling a mix of relief and emptiness. He retrieved his phone and deleted the last photo of her remaining in the album. Life goes on, he thought, but it would take time until the sound of the boat motor, the kiss filmed from afar, and the taste of betrayal became just an old file on a forgotten USB drive. Driving back home, he remembered something his college volleyball coach used to repeat: discipline is doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching. He'd smile when he heard that phrase, but now its meaning was different. The discipline of the heart, he concluded, would be learning not to surrender to bitterness or cynicism. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.